how India scaled Mount G20. At any point did you feel this is way tougher than I thought it would be?
No, all through the year. We finally said, take it or leave it.
Mr. Amitabh Kant, thank you so much for joining us on the Quint, and thank you so much for joining me on my show, Badi Badi Baatein. Very, very badi baat for the country, the way India scripted the success of the G20 summit under its presidency, the way the New Delhi Leaders Declaration was signed. It was something quite different than what you had done before. Was this the toughest peak that you yourself have scaled in your career, the presidency of G20?
No, this was very tough. This was very tough. It was also in another area. You know, I'd worked in domestic administration. Yeah. I'd run a district, I'd built tourism, I had driven industrial policy, I've done the aspirational district program, the Startup India, but this was totally new field for me. Yeah. The art of diplomacy, your ability to bring 20 countries together, it required skill of a totally different kind, and it was extremely challenging because at that point of time, you know, it was the post-COVID era. A vast segment of population had gone below poverty line across the world. Lots of people had lost jobs. There was a huge climate crisis. There was a war in Russia-Ukraine war was going on for 3 years. You know, so you had huge challenges, and food, fuel, fertilizer, all were getting impacted. Plus, there were several other challenges which India had to confront with when it took over the presidency. And therefore, it was a challenge of a very different kind.
Absolutely. And I remember after the success of the summit, there was praise for you from across the spectrum, be it political, be it bureaucratic. Some people labeled you as the master of diplomacy. How do you personally see your success when it comes to being the Sherpa of the G20?
The Sherpa to the Prime Minister of India. The leader was the Prime Minister. You know, he was the leader of G20 during the course of that year, and I was his Sherpa. Now, it would have been very difficult to pull off a G20 if the leader did not have great leadership ability, if he did not have charisma, if he did not have good equation with political leaders from across the world, if he had not given me the freedom, if he was not willing to go be bold and risky, and if he was not courageous. You know, he had delegated a very vast field for negotiation for me, so he was confident, he was willing to be bold, willing to be gutsy, and I think he was extremely calm. So I think my leader deserves a lot of credit for this.
The New Delhi Leaders Declaration, from what we know, had at least 15 drafts. There were 200 bilaterals that went into it, 83 paragraphs. To get a consensus on those, a lot went behind through the year. I mean, there were 60 meetings across the country. But peculiarly, none of those meetings could achieve a consensus to put out a joint statement. There were countries that were having their own bilaterals, etc. At any point, did you feel this is way tougher than I thought it would be?
No, all through the year. All through the year, that whole year, I was thinking that it's going to be impossible. It was a final bit of meetings in the last 12 days that we took the gambit, we took the courage, we were extremely gutsy. Drafts after draft failed, but within 30 minutes of that, we kept coming out with new drafts. And we negotiated bilaterally with everybody. We knew everybody's red line. And we finally said, take it or leave it. Yeah. And we also told them that if you do not, are not willing to arrive at a consensus on key and critical issues confronting the world, challenges of the post-COVID impact, challenges of a slow sustainable development goals, challenges of climate, if the other countries are not willing to arrive at a consensus at all, there's a lack of responsibility. And in that case, that's the Prime Minister had told me, to clearly tell them that India would rather prefer to be member of BRIC, a member of IPSA, rather than continue as a member of G20.
Speaking of consensus on climate, could you tell us what were the key areas when it came to climate and who was playing hardball on those issues?
So the climate was very complex. In fact, it was probably as difficult, if not more difficult, than geopolitics, because there were different ambitions. G7 had the ambition of 1.5 degrees centigrade. They were not willing to commit on finance at all, whereas Global South's ambition was on finance, because they have not occupied the carbon space. The carbon space has all been occupied by G7. And then you had Saudi Arabia, which was not even willing to discuss climate. They were not even willing to discuss fossil fuel. So you had different perspective, different canvases, and it was tough to bring everybody together. So we had to raise the ambition on finance from the G7 countries, which is reflected in a very strong document on the Green Development Pact. And we had to raise a little bit of ambition from Global South on action to be taken. But we pushed for doubling of renewable energy. We pushed for doubling of energy efficiency. We pushed for the biofuel alliance. We pushed for green hydrogen to make it a better world for all of us to live in. And only India could achieve that Green Development Pact, otherwise it was impossible.
There was one very peculiar statement which caught my attention, which I'd like to read out. China opposed all issues where India-led terminology was used, like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, life and women-led development were tactically opposed. Could you tell us in detail about that? What was their specific opposition and why?
So, our presidency was about one earth, one family, one future, which was Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Now, throughout the year, China opposed us on the use of the terminology Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. They opposed us on lifestyle for environment. They opposed us on women-led development. We found it impossible throughout the whole year. But then we realized that you can't do G20 without taking China along. Therefore, we built up very good relationship with Chinese Sherpa. There's a colleague of mine called Ashish who built up relationship with them. I built up relationship with their Sherpa. We worked very hard at it to get China around. And towards the final round of the meeting of the Sherpas, we were able to get them to agree to everything, every single request from which we had made. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, life, women-led development, each one of them, China supported us on that.
Throughout the negotiations, the G20 nations were very divided on the Russia-Ukraine issue. The G7, US, allies of the US, they all wanted Russia to be strongly labeled as an aggressor, etc. China, on the other hand, Russia, of course, they wanted very strong mentions of, sanctions by the West. And these two sides just could not meet eye to eye on that matter.
Throughout the year.
Throughout the year. And then for us to get, consensus on those paragraphs, which I was reading were very carefully worded paragraph, which could be interpreted by each of the sides, the people who are supporting Ukraine, the people who are supporting Russia and India.
And that para, no other multilateral forum, including United Nations, including the Security Council, has been able to arrive at. And now that has become the key para for every multilateral forum to follow.
You've said how it's better than the UNSC as well.
Absolutely. It was master drafting of that para.
What next for Mr. Amitabh Kant? Is there a bigger role that we can expect?
Well, I'll continue to read, I'll continue to write, I'll continue to ideate, I'll continue to innovate myself.
Mr. Kant, thank you so much for speaking to the Quint, and thank you so much for joining me on Badi Badi Baatein, and I wish you all the luck for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.